I've always been particular to the bullet hell genre ever since I found Toho project games when I was in high school. There's an engaging and empowering feeling that occurs when met with a seemingly insurmountable obstacle, like a massive wall of bullets, and coming out the other side. Deflector caught my eye on Steam with its neon sci-fi aesthetic and what appeared to be fast-paced action roguelike gameplay with bullet hell elements. Honestly, after playing much longer games recently, I was looking for a shorter experience, and Deflector seemed to fit the bill. Deflector is a top-down roguelite action game where you control the Specimen, an experimental entity bioengineered in a laboratory that's managed by an artificial intelligence known as Deflector. The goal of the Specimen is to defeat a virus, referred to as the Source, that's corrupting areas within the microscopic test environment. There are narrative sci-fi overtones about the nature of the experiment being conducted that are revealed as you continue to play the game. Everything is themed around being a microscopic test organism. Power-ups are mutations, different classes are bioshells, and the extra post-game difficulty options are virus strains. The gameplay of Deflector is structured in the typical roguelite format. Playtime is divided into runs, with areas to clear and bosses that must be defeated in order to engage the final boss. There are 4 areas that must be cleared and have unique enemy types, environmental hazards, and a Great Virus and Apex Virus that must be defeated. A Great Virus acts as the midpoint boss, with the Apex Virus standing as the main boss of the area. Areas are divided into a tree of nodes that must be strategically navigated, and each node has a specific reward that it offers, such as shops, healing stations, or various power-ups. When you clear an area, the source spreads to the other areas, making them more dangerous through spawning additional enemies, having more enemy waves, and having more nodes affected by anomalies. Anomalies are random conditions and buffs that make the enemies in a node more deadly, and are only revealed after entering a node. As you defeat enemies, you obtain upgrades that boost your stats or mutations that increase your offensive abilities. Mutations provide effects with defined triggers, and each mutation scales with one of your 3 attributes: attack, deflect, and health. The game's defining trait, as hinted by the title, is the ability to deflect enemy projectiles back at them to protect yourself and deal damage based on your deflect attribute. There's also a main attack that scales with your attack attribute and varies between bioshells. You also have access to an invincible dash that is limited to a specific number of charges before needing time to refill. Each bioshell has a different playstyle in the form of unique main and deflect attacks, passives, and active skills. For example, Eradicator throws a boomerang and has a directional deflect that your boomerang will interact with, while Slasher uses a sword and has a radial deflect attack that can be empowered with rage gained by defeating enemies with your main attack. Enemies in combat nodes spawn in waves and will primarily attack with projectiles. There are 2 types of projectiles, red and yellow, with only the former able to be deflected. Yellow projectiles must instead be avoided, which forces the player to pay attention to what's coming their way. Enemies with yellow health bars always have a chance to fire non-deflectable projectiles, but some anomaly modifiers give that chance to all enemies. Defeating enemies charges your active skill, which will often provide a burst of damage or increase your damage output for a limited time. As you defeat enemies and clear nodes, you acquire cells that act as currency during the run, and DNA that can be used to acquire permanent and activated enhancements in the hub before a new run. These enhancements provide various benefits, such as increasing the amount of health that healing nodes restore, unlocking new node types, or new means of spending cells. Permanent enhancements are immediately applied, while active enhancements are divided into tiers with a limit of 2 per tier that can be applied. When a run ends, collected DNA is also tallied as progress toward research levels that unlock more mutations that you can find during a run. Deflector initially presents itself as a difficult, fast-paced action game, and while it does succeed in those areas, there are some aspects that detract from the overall enjoyment of the game. For one, the thematic direction of Deflector is interesting, but there are cases where enemies and areas don't feel like they're consistent with the microscopic virus concept. Sometimes enemies are robots, and other times they're clearly organic creatures. While this doesn't necessarily distract from the gameplay, it was something that I quickly noticed as I spent more time in the game. The fast pace of combat is engaging, and having non-deflectable projectiles keeps the player on their toes, but there are aspects of the user experience that I feel clash with the concept of avoiding projectiles. The movement speed of your character can sometimes make it difficult to precisely dodge large numbers of yellow projectiles. Another decision that I found confusing is by default the camera moves in the direction you're aiming for better visibility, but it's a very large and quick movement. This movement can make it difficult to read the trajectory of a projectile with your peripheral vision, making it more difficult to position your character to avoid projectiles. The camera movement can be reduced with the camera sensitivity setting, but personally, I'm not sure why such a large movement is the default setting in a game that has a specific focus on seeing and dodging projectiles. There are also some instances where it can be very difficult to see what's happening on screen. Some mutations give you area of effect abilities, but often the same colors are used for friendly effects and unfriendly effects. Enemies, which all fire red and yellow projectiles, are often the same shade of red and yellow and can be difficult to see later in the game when there are more projectiles filling the screen. There are also some instances where your hurt box or enemy attack indicators feel misleadingly sized. Occasionally, I found myself getting hit by attacks that I thought I was avoiding based on the attack indicator, or getting hit by projectiles that I still deflected because I let them get too close before deflecting. In fact, because of all these factors making it difficult to tell if you're in danger, standing still can sometimes be the most effective action to take, which feels like the antithesis of the gameplay Deflector is striving to achieve. Despite these issues with game feel, Deflector does achieve an impressive diversity of gameplay through the various bioshells. While there are the standard sword and gun characters, there are also very creative playstyles implemented. In fact, the very first bioshell you use, Eradicator, is a great example of this. While the boomerang and deflection mechanics take some getting used to, it's still a very interesting playstyle that I don't think I've encountered before in similar games. In fact, as I got more comfortable with Deflector, the impressive diversity of bioshells kept me more invested in tackling higher difficulties than the perceived narrative. While Deflector does have some interesting ideas, I felt it struggles to provide longevity that is present in other roguelite action games. Mutations do provide variety, but mostly through augmenting the defined gameplay mechanics, resulting in little variance of how to approach combat outside of selecting a different bioshell. While there are certainly standout elements such as the art direction, soundtrack, and the variety of gameplay styles, in my opinion Deflector, despite being a solid title on its own merit, is missing an element that compels the player to continue after overcoming the challenge of successfully beating the game. Thanks for watching, take care, and remember, keep having fun.